This is a reading from the Notebooks by Marie Valtorta, 1945 to 1950. December 25th, 1947. The gifts of Christmas promised to be by Mary Most Holy. 1. The crushing of my dignity. 2. A more vivid likeness to the poor Jesus. 3. I was brought a little work to read on the apparition of the Virgin Queen of Revelation, and I finally know something in this connection. At another time, I'll make my notes on the information it contained. Footnote 344 on December 31st, 1947. 4. The maternal gift of my mother, Mary, Most Holy. 5. The secret gift. Which of these was the greatest gift I was promised? Some will think it was the last one, the one that is too lofty and personal for me to describe it and regale the curious with it, but I say it is the first one, and Mary Most Holy approves. And with the gifts, a pain, an offense I feel is being caused. Mary's divine motherhood, a negation of the conception through the action of the Holy Spirit, of her inviolateness before and after the birth of Jesus in Mary's virginal womb, a mockery of the chastity of the two virginal and chaste spouses, and a negation of the ecstasy which was Jesus' birth, free from all the forms of distress accompanying women's childbearing and the birth of children. My fever rose to 39 from the pain of these things, and if only they were expressed by atheists, but it was an assiduously practicing Catholic woman who said them, elderly, raised in an extremely Christian family, and at a school run by sisters. I tried to introduce the luminous truth in the midst of so much black mire, out of love for the truth, and to Mary Most Holy, and also because the Rosas, whose faith was in very bad shape, were present. But I ended up ceasing to talk because every word of mine was met by a bolder and more sacrilegious derisive retort. And this was my Christmas, 1947, perhaps the last, but I prefer dying to hearing Mary, Mother and Virgin, being insulted in the second of her most beautiful mysteries. December 28th, 1947. Mary Most Holy, who had filled this month of December with herself always present, she alone from the 8th on, entirely lovely, the lily of paradise, in her appearance as Mary Immaculate, indescribable light, which is flesh, possessing the immaterial, no, not immaterial, for it is a real body, or rather, the transfigured, ideal beauty of glorified bodies, descended today, the feast of the Holy Innocents, from her niche of light, the light emanating from her blessed body, and became Mary of Nazareth, the pure, lovely, delicate, motherly, humble Mary who lived in Palestine 20 centuries ago. She came to my bedside, dressed in white, with a light linen veil of thin woven cloth over her blonde hair, parted at the top of her head, just as I had seen her so many times in the visions. She was gentle but slightly sad, resting her very lovely hands on the edge of my bed, though she said, "I am here, so that you can contemplate me, study my features from very close up, once again, and grasp where the difference lies between what I was like on earth and what I am now like in heaven. In Lourdes, in Fatima, and in the apparitions in general, I appear as I am now in heaven, and my appearance already possesses the indescribable luminous beauty of glorified bodies, the beauty which the seers of those apparitions never grasp entirely in all its details. Note that they were able to mention the clothing I wear, the rosary I hold, the rock or tree where I stand, the gestures I make, and the expression on my face, but they are always uncertain, and, involuntarily, they are never truthful. About describing my face and the color of my eyes and hair and skin, they make an effort to do so, but they cannot do so. None of the souls of the seers has seen me to the extent that you have seen me, as a girl, spouse, and mother on earth, and as the Queen of Heaven, and every time you say to yourself, it is still her, but how different she is as the glorious Queen of Heaven, taken up in body and soul among the angels, from the times when she is the humble Mary of Nazareth. Look at me carefully, daughter, and soothe your pain. Look at me. Am I Mary of Nazareth? I observed her carefully. Close as she was to my face, I examined her skin, of a warm magnolia paleness, suffused with a tenuous pink on her cheeks, her appropriately distended red lips, her thin, straight nose, her perfectly proportioned, clear, sky-blue eyes under her lofty, smooth brow, the perfect oval face of a girl. I don't know why her face always makes me think of a white flame or a lily bud about to open. The curves are so gentle in their oval. I looked at her beautiful, mildly blonde hair, fine, soft, and slightly wavy. I considered that if, instead of being clasped into heavy braids extending over her head, they were hanging loose, the waviness would have been more marked. And, above all, I got lost perceiving the tenuous color of her body, breathing close to me, and her fragrance, her characteristic scent, the smell of Mary, the smell of the Virgin. Mary read my wish to abandon myself on her motherly shoulder to obtain relief in so many afflictions of every kind, and drew to herself. I remained like that, I don't know for how long. She then left me, saying, "Write that I have clasped you to my heart." I wrote this last 5 lines. She then said, "And now look at me." She became transfigured, rising from the ground, separating herself from my bed, supported by a silver cloud bathed in her extremely white light. Her body shone, and her robe, turning from white to white light, shone. Her face shone, growing sharper as if the light were spiritualizing it. Her enraptured gaze shone. The light was so bright that the pale blue of her eyes became a ray, and the gold of her hair was almost no longer distinguishable as such. It seemed dark in comparison to the light emitted by the glorified body of the Mother of God. She lowered her eyes towards me and smiled, asking, "Is it me?" "Yes." "But am I the same woman as the woman who was Jesus' mother?" "Yes and no," I answered intrepidly, for intrepidity is needed to make certain comparisons and confessions. "And yet, it's me. You see, I am like this in heaven. I appeared like this in Lourdes and Fatima, where the seers saw me most clearly, since they were innocent, like you, my daughter. The more innocent creatures are, the more they see me as I am, and describe me exactly, insofar as they can as creatures, and have my likeness sculpted, insofar as an image can resemble me." She came back to me in human form. She asked, "Is your torment being calmed?" I wept. She caressed me. I cried, because since I had read that she happened to appear to Bruno Cornacchiola, footnote 345, the seer of the 3 fountains, I now know his name, with dark hair of an oriental type, I had thought I was deceived in saying Mary was blonde, and yet she is. A pale blonde, moreover, nearly straw-colored, almost pure gold. I was seeing it clearly. She was here, with her head less than 30 centimeters away from my eyes. She caressed me to console me and said, "Oh, Maria, do not be afraid. The shadow of the grotto and the mantle greatly contributed to the mistake, and it was not necessary for me to reveal myself perfectly to a sinner, as with the innocent Bernarda, Lucy, Hyacinth, Francis, and the little John of my Jesus. But listen carefully. To you that are a servant of Mary," footnote 346, a tertiary order of the servants of Mary, "I say that the craftsman who sculpted me in such a way that I do not recognize myself would have done well to recall the statues of Lourdes and Fatima, where I am depicted insofar as man can depict the image of the Mother of God, and above all, he should have drawn inspiration from the face with which I am portrayed, at Our Lady of the Annunciation in Florence," footnote 347. The celebrated fresco attributed to an angelic intervention is found in the Basilica of Our Lady of the Annunciation in Florence. The mortal remains of Maria Valtorta have been resting in the adjoining cloister since 1973. I say that the craftsman who sculpted me in such a way that I do not recognize myself would have done well to recall the statues of Lourdes and Fatima, where I am depicted insofar as man can depict the image of the Mother of God. And, above all, he should have drawn inspirations from the face with which I am portrayed at Our Lady of the Annunciation in Florence. The face from which, if man and time had not altered the image, everyone could discern what I was like when the Spirit of God rendered me pregnant with God. The smoke from candles and time have darkened the colors, and men have done damage, but one can still see what God's girl, Joseph's betrothed, was like in that springtime of her years, in that blooming Nazarene springtime. Look at me, and forget the pain, the fear, everything. Remember, I saw the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 people on whose foreheads his name and that of the Father were written, and they were singing a new song, which no one could learn except those 144,000 rescued from the earth, the first fruits for God and the Lamb, nor was any deceit found in their mouths. 3:48. Revelations chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. Do you think that you can't belong to this multitude because you are not an innocent? It is further stated that the angel of the Lord marks 144,000 servants of the Lord with God's sign, and that they come in white robes to the eternal Hosanna after having passed from the great tribulation. Footnote 349, Revelations chapter 7, verses 9 to 17. As you have it. But you see, I, the Queen of the angels and Mother of God, am impressing that sign on your forehead with a kiss. Be at peace. The triune Lord and I, starting on the earth, are drying all of your tears. I abandon myself again to her motherly embrace. December 29th, 1947. Most Holy Mary, once again. This December is truly filled with her, and I asked, why doesn't Jesus come any more? Mary drew me to herself and said, I come because he is very severe towards many, and his appearance and his words would bring you pain, my very afflicted daughter. For this reason I come. My task is to hold back the lightning bolt of his words out of mercy on the executioners and the victims. I mediate. Aren't you happy that I'm coming? Oh, I would like you to always, but you were offended here, in this room, at Christmas. Footnote 350. See December 25th, 1947. Mary grew sad, but clasped me more tightly to her heart, while saying, don't think about it any more. Your suffering over those heresies healed my suffering. The carnality of men and in men is so strong that not even faith in the Lord and fidelity to the Church can enable them to believe in my utter purity and the chastity, the inviolateness of my womb, which only God penetrated, and which gave forth God in flesh, blood, soul, and divinity, through one of those mysteries and powers for which the laws of nature and of solid bodies mean nothing. Only those who have plunged into my purity and absorbed it and made it their life and vision can understand and believe. You can, because you have rendered me purity, vision, and life for yourself. Take pity on the blind and those feeding on humanity. Her caresses made me forget all affliction. December 31st, 1947. I want to close this 1947 by speaking of Mary Most Holy. They are my words, though. The Most Blessed Virgin had promised me a great gift for Christmas. I received many Christmas presents, and of many kinds, some quite bitter, others filled with wisdom. One very sweet, but that one is a secret, and yet I don't feel that the great gift is that one. I say that the great gift is precisely the first point, see December 25th, just as I stated from the outset on taking an inventory of the supernatural and natural gifts received on December 25th. Yes, the first and the second, the two which have shaped me most in Christ, most bitter, like his chalice, meritorious, let us hope, like an act of suffering by him, the complex passion of Christ which is completed in me. Thank you, my Lord. But today I want to comment on the little work on Our Lady of the Three Fountains, which was brought to me to read at Christmas, and which I must return to its owner tomorrow. The work was written by Giulio Locatelli, Unitas Publishers, and is entitled Our Lady Appeared and Spoke in the Grotto of the Three Fountains. It was printed by Il Giornale d'Italia Company, Via dell'Umiltà, 48, Rome, on October the 4th, 1947. I am specifying in this way so that those reading this notebook one day will clearly understand what I read and commented on and when. I do not find it at all strange that Mary Most Holy should have appeared to a great sinner, a man who, because he was a man, and because of his hostility towards the Church and the Virgin, can certainly not be termed a hysteric, someone affected by spiritual hallucinations who amounted to a religious fanatic. No, this certainly cannot be said of Mr. Cornacchiola. It is said regarding me, Bernadette, Lucy, Francis, and Hyacinth, as it was said of Newman. Children and women, abnormal beings for so-called scientists who in reality are, in my view, nothings, but the truly incredulous and atheists, even if they wear the priest's cassock. Atheists because they deny that God can manifest himself miraculously on his own, or through the manifestation of his virgin, the daughter, spouse, and mother of God, or the saints and angels. Children may be presumed to be influenced by stories, a comfortable explanation which those not able to believe in divine power and mercy provide for themselves. Women may be presumed to be suffering from hallucinations because they are subject to imperfections of the laws of female nature, leading them to get delirious to compensate for what they have not had, a husband. Another comfortable explanation provided to themselves by those mentioned above, who are unable to believe in God's power and mercy, and are incapable of responding to them in such a way as to reduce the separation in vision and comprehension between creatures and God to the point of being able to see and hear. Matters of heavenly revelation is to apply the phrase physical illness to what is a psychological and spiritual perfection granted by divine goodness to those who burned and are consumed in a single love and desire, love for God and desire for him. But Cornacchiola is not a child, and he is not a woman. On the contrary, he was not even one of those meek men with the heart of a child, or a sweet, gentle woman. He was a violent fellow. Even if it were not written in the work, it would suffice to look at his photograph to understand that he was. The tough, aggressive face of a subversive, rendered lean by the rage devouring him, burned by the blaze of his anti-Catholic passion, with the eyes, please forgive me, of a delinquent rather than a normal man. A magnificent example of a revolutionary agitator, able to preach hate and sedition to the mobs. And indeed, he preached hatred and sedition against the Church of Christ, the flock of Christ, against God, the Virgin. I don't know when that photograph of him in the work was taken, whether it was before or after the apparition, but even if it is from after the apparition, and I'm not astonished, since I know how long it takes to convalesce spiritually from infernal intoxication, in such fashion that not a diabolical expression, but one that is serene, proper to a man who loves God and is his friend, returns to one's face. I must say that his face has still not become pacified. Of course, in this photograph, the image chiseled by hate is still on his face, the image he arrogantly raised up against his Creator, against the most sweet Virgin and Mother, in order to howl his hatred at them. I say, I am not astonished that she appeared to a sinner, a Protestant. On the contrary, I say it could well take place. First of all, because a soul and several other souls, those of the whole Cornacchiola family, were saved. In addition, because in this way the usual deniers of us seers will not be able to waive the usual explanations of infantilism prompted by certain influences and hysteria connected with hallucinations. I would like God and the Virgin to appear to many sinners and enemies of God and the Church, both to convert them, as with Saul on the road to Damascus, and so that the incredulous world will be convinced that God can do all, and his manifestations to spirits are true. And let us proceed further. I read on page 6, in the 6th line in the chapter, the seer, messenger, the 4 apparitions, well versed in the study of the Bible and the Gospels. Good for him. I am so unversed that since the work was finished, and I thus no longer needed to verify the words I heard in the dictations as taken from the Bible and introduce the chapters and verses, 8 months and 3 days have now transpired. I have not opened the Bible any more. If I touch it, it is to dust it off. In any case, what should I open it for? I understand nothing in terms of doctrine, symbols, and so on. Historically, what is before Christ does not interest me very much, and what is in the Gospels is known to me as their chronicler. I thus leave everything closed, and read the memories I possess within myself, my only spiritual reading. But those who say I write inspired words because I am highly cultured and so on, when it is not true, why don't they invalidate the dictation by Cornacchiola, who is well versed, and so forth, as written by him? To sling mud, try to sling mud, at Most Holy Mary Immaculate, dogmas, the Church, and so on, he must have carefully read, dissected, and minutely inspected, that is, the pseudo-contradictions which, by dint of observing with the microscope of atheistic hatred, may perhaps be found in the tradition, and even in something higher than the tradition. I have nothing to do with all of this. I have always believed, simply, in everything the Church has proposed for my belief, believed like that, without reasoning to explain to myself what is a mystery. I have believed, as Jesus says, with the blessedness of absolute faith. Blessed are those able to believe without seeing. Footnote 351, John chapter 20, verse 29. Until April 23, 1943, Good Friday, I would never have imagined that the Master, as a divine friend who had been guiding me for decades, would want to become my master and reveal to me so many mysteries and events. I would never have imagined I could understand such lofty things, while the light of his beam made me capable of understanding. I now know the essence of the deepest truths, but the beauty of the lesson has been lost. To get it back, I must search through the dictation, and in spite of this, I understand it poorly, for, away from the divine light, I do not understand very well even what I comprehended on a given day. But I do not mind. I go on believing simply. A day will come when I shall understand everything. Everything. That is, God. When I know and possess God, I shall understand everything. All the mysteries, all the truths, all the lessons, and eternally. Let us proceed further. We come to the description of the apparition. I find it realistic that neither the youngsters nor Cornacchiola were frightened on seeing Mary. The supernatural, when it comes from heaven, never causes fear. At most, it may cause amazement. Since childhood, I have always been quite afraid of apparitions. At boarding school, too, when the sisters would say, "Just imagine if Jesus were to appear. What joy!" I would reply, "No, for goodness sake. If I could not get out through the door, I would escape down through the window." Footnote 352. See Part 2 of her autobiography. I remember the terror I felt one night when I was mistakenly left locked in the school chapel. It was June. The Sacred Heart was on the main altar. I had asked for permission to go and visit it when recreation was coming to an end, and I was given permission. I don't know why, but I didn't hear this lay sister locking the doors. I must have been praying really intensely. When I recovered awareness and headed for the exits, 3 doors, I found them all closed. I went back to the altar and was about to pass through the sacristy, but unfortunately I raised my eyes towards the image, and from the play of the moonlight it seemed to me that it was moving, bending towards me. I lost my head with fear. I screamed and kicked so much, though the chapel was isolated, they heard me and came to my aid. If they had not heard me, they would have found me dead of fright in the morning. I say this to indicate how afraid I am of what goes beyond the natural, and yet, when Jesus' love changed from inner words to inner visions, whether short, gentle, or sad, and then growing more and more became an embrace, a manifestation of voice, presence, and contact, as it has been now for 4 years and 8 months, I was not at all afraid. On the contrary, the strong, gentle hands of my Savior, hands caressing and caring for me, resting upon the sickest organs, and in the most dangerous crises, to give me life to go on serving my Lord, pierced hands left for me to examine the tender, lukewarm little hands of the child Jesus, placed by Mary on my bed, small pink feet, ice cold, given to me to warm up, and the luminous feet of the risen one, with the beaming ruby of their wounds, given to me to kiss, the soft hair of Christ tickling my face during his embrace, the warmth of Christ's flesh, his strong, loving shoulder, blood drunk from his open heart, amidst the flames which do not cause the pain of a burn, but ineffable refreshment, and the soft breast of Mary, such light, pure hands, regal and maternal, and John's smile, and the inexpressible goodness of Joseph the patriarch, and all of you that come to me, so good, such great friends, and beautiful, the joy of my life as a victim. No, you do not cause me fear. The supernatural from heaven is peace and rejoicing, this alone. What Cornacchiola says on page 8, line 8, is also true. I feel very, very light, almost loosed from the flesh, and enveloped in an ethereal light. Fine. He expresses himself quite well. I, who have been experiencing physical agonies for years, and feel precisely the releasing of the spirit from the flesh when I'm at the most extreme point, observe the same liberation when the supernatural comes. The only difference is that in the freedom of the spirit, in supernatural manifestations, suffering is absent, and everything is joyous ecstasy. The following statement by him is also true. A heavenly woman, impossible for me to describe. Indeed, it is impossible, even for those who have seen her hundreds and hundreds of times. And the fact that it was impossible for Cornacchiola, who saw her 4 times, is clear from his description of her. He speaks of black hair. Mary Most Holy explained in the dictation on November 24th, footnote 353, the reference should apparently be to December 28th, 1947, why they appeared dark. On my own, I can state that the light emanating from Mary, when she manifests herself gloriously, is such that any color seems dark in comparison to Mary's light when she appears enveloped in heavenly radiance. A face of decorous beauty. It is even more, of perfect beauty. An Oriental type? I would say Jewish rather than Oriental. The Oriental type generally has thick, sensual lips and rather wide, open, dark eyes. Mary does not have sensual lips or Oriental eyes at all, as they appear for the majority. Eyes not at all Arabian or Indian or Asian. Not a bit, really, but a sweet gaze which I have sometimes noticed in the young Jewish women and a celestially light blue irises. But I am not surprised that Cornacchiola described her that way. It is a beauty whose detail escapes one as soon as it has disappeared. A lovely poem remains within, but the detail gets lost. In the early times, until receiving a special grace of God, granted me so that I could describe clearly and exactly the appearance, too, of the characters portrayed in the work, I was always uncertain, once a vision was over, about the nuance of the hair, irises, and skin of both Jesus and Mary, because to say they are blonde is very little. In the color of blonde hair there are many nuances, from the nearly white blonde of the albinos to almost copper auburn. And the same applies to the irises. To say sky blue is to say nothing. There can be a very pale, virtually opal sky blue, a bright sky blue, a periwinkle blue, a purple blue, a sapphire blue, a green blue, and a turquoise blue. It is hard, very hard to say, especially when spiritual and natural emotion absorbs us into the whole and not into the details. The hairstyle. I have always seen her with her flowing locks parted at the top of her head, but that is not important. As she changes clothing, she can change hairstyle. Blessed Mary repeated the colors on November the 24th. Footnote 354. See note 353. A white robe, a pink belt, and a green mantle. Exactly. Cornacchiola is a rare man who is able to describe the color of clothing with precision. The height of the Blessed Mary. On comparing her to Jesus, at whose side I have often seen her close by, I would say 1.65 meters at most, since the top of Mary's head reaches Jesus' shoulders. But to us at present, she seems taller than she is because of her long dresses extending to the ground. Long dresses are known to make people taller, to make people look taller. Her expression, indeed. Blessed Mary is slightly sad, or rather, always pensive, even when smiling. Moreover, if she speaks about human sins and her son's pain over them, she gets really sad. The very soft voice, oh, that's it. This is easier to retain, because it is a note of such sweetness that it penetrates us and remains like no other. That's just right, a voice that makes you dissolve with joy, and we're able to remember it better than other material things, like the color of hair, eyes, skin, and so on, because the voice is so incorporeal, and in those instants of vision, we perceive with the incorporeal part of ourselves. Yes, when the supernatural says to us, come, we rush to present ourselves. The spirit rushes, because our spirit, though the slave of a reason oppressing it and wanting to separate it from its origin, is always desiring it. And at the powerful call of good, it turns and rushes ahead when the hour of grace arrives for it, obtained through the wish of the heavenly beings or through the intercession of souls praying for the sinner. In Cornacchiola's case, the 9 Fridays of the Sacred Heart. And I am moved on considering that Mary, in appearing at the 3 fountains, in addition to the other admirable things done and taught by her, came to, shall we say, renew Jesus' promise to St. Margaret Mary. There are some who do not believe it. There are some who fulfill the 9 Fridays just out of habit, with no firm trust that they are a pledge of salvation. And Mary, the mother who formed the heart of Jesus, thus comes to show tangibly that the 9 Fridays of the Sacred Heart are eternal salvation. But I was saying that when the supernatural sends forth its call, the Spirit turns and rushes over, and the Spirit by its nature reaches the place of the encounter and understands. But burdensome matter finds it hard to follow the Spirit. The Spirit is agile, like an angel. The flesh is sluggish, like a sluggish animal, slow to follow, perceive, and see, dull-witted in retaining, imperfect in remembering, and quick to forget. It is the torment of us seers when we emerge from the action of God to be unable to see, understand, and recall anymore with the perfection with which we saw, understood, and recalled in the hour of union. We would like to be able to rediscover that perfect joy in ourselves by the power of memory alone, but unfortunately we find only fragments of the picture, of the music we enjoyed, and we suffer, seeking, like people who have lost their sight, like those nourished with a sweet heavenly food which, with hunger for it and nausea towards everything else, we now search for everywhere without ever finding exactly the same food. Moreover, it is right for it to be this way. We have received the suprasensible joy of union and knowledge of God or Mary. What paradise will be like, if we manage to be just until death. It is right after the free gift, which is a foretaste of our share in eternal joy for us mortals, still in exile and under trial, to eat the bread of ashes of the children of Adam. God's choice of us is not an absolute privilege. It is not, and must not become in us, the basis for presuming we are forever above the condition of children of Adam the sinner. He deprived himself and deprived us for all time of the blessed life which God wanted for his creatures, and as long as we are on earth, we must taste punishment and turn the misfortunes deriving from sin into a means of eternal victory. Our being chosen binds us to a holier life and a more complete sacrifice, both because we have received a good measure of wisdom, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing. Footnote 355, Luke chapter 6, verse 38. And because we have undeservedly received an excelling gift of love. For this reason we hear ourselves being told by the heavenly voices, "We do not promise you earthly joys. You will not be free from human pain, but, on the contrary, will suffer persecution. You will receive your gift in heaven, though, if you are faithful." And since mercy and charity are even greater than justice, in order to comfort us in the pain and persecution which remain for us as creatures, and will be conferred upon us as seers, God thus leaves the luminous memory of that hour, of those hours, in the depths of our spirit. Even if we are unable to revive the most lovely vision with all the slightest material details, the precious jewel of the lesson remains. My first impulse was to speak. Cry out, Cornacchiola says. It's true, the first time it is really like that, but human agitation is overcome by the joy and peace coming from the vision, and there is no more movement. Afterwards, perhaps, when the instant of heaven is over, a new vitality comes, a desire to act, to speak, to sing our joy, to share it with others, to say to them, "Come to the founts of peace and joy." But spiritual modesty binds us, at least it does in my case, and to lift the veils over the mystery which has been accomplished is costly. One obeys if God has so ordered, but one would prefer to keep the treasure hidden. Cornacchiola gave vent to the exuberance deriving from such hours with the words engraved on the tufa and the sign left in the grotto. I express it with song, the only thing I can still do, infirm as I am. The black robe on the ground and a broken cross. Since 1943, December or November, I too have seen these two things trampled on, violated, and they were pointed out to me by Mary, and concerning them and what they sought to express, the Divine Master spoke, but I cannot reveal that tremendous lesson, which I always bear in mind. I don't know where there is a mention of what that black priestly robe and that broken cross mean in the portion of the secret message Cornacchiola received. If it is so, God, who in order not to have me hated even more by a certain group of persons, had me destroy that dictation, to inform his vicar thereof, took Cornacchiola, who is materially stronger than I, to react against the backlash from that group. I have not lost a syllable of this extraordinary conversation because of the very strange phenomenon whereby, when I had not yet transcribed it faithfully, it regularly unfolded in my brain from the first words, I am, to the last word, love, with a slow rhythm, like a discourse impressed upon a record, repeating itself without interruption. It's just like that. When wisdom wants us to remember, and we are not in a position to write, while wisdom speaks, the words are then repeated, just like those impressed upon a record, and they do not grow silent until they can be transcribed. On many, dozens of occasions, which has happened to me, too, and especially when the dictations are commands to be transmitted, the messages received to be conveyed to someone, or so that they will remain in my mind. For instance, though 4 years and 40 days have passed since I received that famous, tremendous dictation, which I had to conceal at once in a sealed envelope, and was to be given to the pontiff in office at the time of my death, and which later, as a result of events many are aware of, had to be destroyed, burnt, on March 24th, 1946, through an order I received from St. Gabriel the Archangel, and I burned it without opening the envelope again, and thus without rereading what I had written on November 19th, 1943, as far as I recall, and no longer remembered, note carefully, the words in that dictation have been reignited in my mind since I burned the text, and it hears them every day, even though I make every effort not to hear them, for they are too frightening, just as if a record were repeating them to me, or a tireless repeater. And so it is too with certain secret lessons which God wants me to remember without having to write them, because he does not want others to benefit from them after bringing me so much affliction, in refusing to bend to the evidence of the supernatural unfolding within me. Only my director knows them. I perfectly recognize that the lesson received by Cornacchiola comes from heaven, because of the words prudence. Exercise prudence. Science will deny God. How often I have heard and hear myself being told these words, and I have had a demonstration that they are true. Isn't science combating the work in which the wisdom which dictated it is shining? The fragrance. That's it. Many of my witnesses have noticed the fragrance remaining after Most Holy Mary's coming to me, and others too have smelled it, but, unaware of its source, they have thought I was emitting perfumes. I have no perfumes at home, and thus cannot emit what I don't have. The best part is that sometimes, when the wave of perfume announcing Mary comes into the room, or remains after her coming, there are some who perceive it, and others who do not. Father Mariano was with me at Christmas. He was speaking, and I was contemplating. I really don't know what he said that day, nor do I know what effect my distraction and my silence had on him. Marta came in and said, "What perfume? It smells like incense." "It smells—" I don't know. I was shaken by this exclamation and looked at Father Mariano, who was saying very, very calmly, "Perfume? I don't smell anything." Mrs. Panigadi, footnote 365, see note 48, came in at that point and exclaimed in turn, "What a fragrance!" The scent, then, was perceived by Marta, Mrs. Panigadi, and me, and not by Father Mariano, and the same smell is described by some as the smell of violets, by others as the smell of roses, and by others as the smell of lilies or incense. I call it the scent of white flowers, because I perceive therein the fragrances of normal lilies, lilies of the valley, magnolias, and jasmines, with tinges of violets, a special scent, not analyzable, but penetrating and very soft. And since I am on this topic, I must also say something else. When Most Holy Mary is in front of me, I pray to her with greater intensity for those who ask for my prayer, or who I know are in need of heavenly mercy. I say to Mary, my Mother and Queen, I ask you, go to so-and-so, or so-and-so, console him, or take them graces, touch their hearts, illumine their minds, and so forth, according to whoever it is. I willingly make the sacrifice of losing the vision of Mary Most Holy, provided other souls will receive comfort or repent. And already more than one of my 7 witnesses, even miles and miles away from me, have spoken to me of special waves of a mysterious fragrance in specific hours of pain or doubt over some thing to be done, or even wickedness. For not all of my witnesses are saints. 2 of them certainly are, but the other 5, they are creatures with their selfishness, defects, spiritual warmness, lukewarmness, and so on. One is the person who at Christmas questioned the virginity of Mary and her physical integrity before and after birth. Footnote 357 on December 25th, 1947. But Jesus chose them exactly that way, just so that it will not be said that, since they are all religious, perhaps sanctimonious, they are easily influenced. No, they are creatures with different temperaments. Some are not observant at all, others not very observant, and others just souls. Only 2. One alone lives with me, Martha, and she is certainly not a model of mysticism. I have to urge her to make her carry out her religious practices, and she performs them very distractedly. I shall reproduce here a passage from the letter of a witness, a serious, balanced, religious person. Recently, a special perfume, like that of the rosary beads, blessed by Mary, has been coming to prompt a more vivid memory of the 2 Marys, the little Virgin of Nazareth, who gives me the incarnate Word, and the crucified Maria, secretary of the Word. This perfume sometimes reaches me in my room, sometimes while I officiate, on certain occasions penetrating, and on others light and delicate, and gives me a perception of closeness which assures me of spiritual communion and heavenly protection. A sweet comfort in my solitude, a divine delicateness which comes to lighten the sacrifice of my crucifixion on not being able to be near you, and so on. Letter of December 25th, 1947. To a great extent, I have left behind the topic I was considering, the apparition, but it is my guardian angel who is suggesting that I write these personal notes on my phenomena, saying they are not useless. Write them, but let us return to Locatelli's publication. I am the Virgin of Revelation. I am she who is in the eternal Trinity, Mary said to me. I am the Virgin Queen of Revelation, and exhorted me to say Queen of Revelation, after Queen of Peace, when reciting the litanies. I am she who is in the eternal Trinity. When I read these words in a very concise newspaper article, a few lines, I was really jolted, for in 1943, that is 4 years before I read them in the newspaper article in May or June 1947, they were spoken to me by Mary, just the same, in all the letters of the alphabet, with the addition of Most Holy before the word Trinity, and without Eternal. I am too ignorant of religious subjects to be able to comment on the chapter entitled The New Attribute of the Virgin, pages 12 and 13, in the publication at issue. But it seems to me that in the work and the dictations in general, a great deal of revelation comes from the lips of Mary, even if one does not go so far as to say that all the revelation in the work has come through Mary, who gave us the incarnate Word, that Jesus the Master, who has dictated so many lessons to me. How many warnings concerning the more or less near future are to be found in the dictations from April 23, 1943, until today, on both the pause between one war and another, 1943 to 1945, and the period of the precursors of the Antichrist, and on the Antichrist and the weapons, atomic and others, given by Satan to men to kill bodies and spirits in a despair, cursing God, and on the persecution of the church, and the fall of 1/3 of the stars swept away by the dragon's tail. The stars, priests, alas! I would like to forget so many things, but revelation, in its essence, is not forgotten. Why know, my God? I preferred not to know. To pray for the unity of Christians. In now distant 1931, my Lord, ordering me, not with the imperiousness of God, but with the love of a spouse, to offer my life once again solemnly, suggested that I do so as well for the unity of the churches in a single sheepfold. And since July 1st, 1931, the feast of the most precious blood, I have made the solemn offering of myself for the unity of the churches as well. For the time being, I have not shed my blood. I have not mixed it with the divine blood, shed for the remission of many. Jesus' heart would like it to be for all. But if my dying is not bloody, this slow death of mine amidst the agonies of so many illnesses, which for 15 years have kept me on a bed, after having tortured me on my feet previously for 4 years, and made me suffer since 1920, is not for this reason less of a shedding of my vitality, and I very willingly suffer for my separated brothers and sisters. I would like to obtain their return to the Church of Rome. In the work, and the dictations too, on several occasions, I have received allusions by Jesus to these poor brothers and sisters, separated from the true sheepfold, and I harbor a genuine, deep love for them. The sacrifice does not burden me, because I would like them to be in the life, the way, and the truth. When, in 1942, I heard about Sister M. Gabriella, the Trappist in Grotta Ferrata, footnote 358, see note 60, I had only one regret, the one that has lasted until now. God's taking so long to consume me, whereas I am in such a hurry to carry out the sacrifice, provided my poor, separated brothers and sisters will come back into the mystical body. Page 21 of the publication. Cornacchiola says, I was born on April 12, 1947. And the journalist Locatelli remarks, the first indisputable miracle. Yes, and I say it is also indisputable proof that it was really the Virgin Mary who appeared, for only heaven converts us like this, totally, whether quickly or slowly, but forever. Once, Father Migliorini, then my spiritual father and director, to reassure me about what was happening to me, said, I am sure that it is the heavenly supernatural, because I have seen spiritual changes being worked in you, and sudden actions of grace being carried out, and you too should believe this. I still have those letters. Afterwards, I don't know what happened to him. I do not want to know, but I also have indisputable proof that the words which are dictated to me come from God, Mary, and the holy inhabitants of the heavens, and the proof is the conversion of the Belfanti family, anti-clerical, spiritistic, and so on, to God, their abjuring spiritistic practices, their faithfulness to the sacraments, and, more than anything else, to judge the origin of the work in me, who am in greater distress than Cornacchiola, though my life before the work was such as to prompt consideration of contact with the divine involving me, a little victim, and the great victim, my love, as more than possible. I think one should take pain into account. In my case, my faithful companion from childhood until death. Pain of every kind, physical, moral, which is the only true faithful thing I have had in life, and to which I am faithful, beloved pain. And as regards the work, the conversions obtained through it, this more than anything else, for a desire for concealment, patience in suffering, and love for the pain are things which God has certainly placed in me, and which I have seconded out of love for Him. But they can be given to those who are not spokesmen too. But converting the possessed clearly cannot come from the devil. One would otherwise have to say that Lucifer is combating himself, tearing away his prey and offering it to God. An impossible absurdity, for Lucifer is greedy. He devours and does not give back, unless God himself fights against him and wins, saving the unfortunate. And I too shall conclude with Cornacchiola's own words, which are so true and right. Those who have had the unhoped-for good fortune to set their gaze upon such heavenly beauty can only desire death, to relive the unspeakable blessedness eternally. Yes, and I hope to be able to do so soon, leaving the earth, where only Jesus and Mary have been my sun and flower, in order to adore eternally, with no more limitations, the only good ones, the only loving ones, as regards poor Maria, whom I have ever known from childhood until now. As for the statue, what poor creatures we are. I don't know what effect that image has on Cornacchiola, unless Mary Most Holy, to bring joy to her convert, transforms that scarecrow in his sight. I think Cornacchiola will be unable to look at it in order not to suffer. I am not able to look at it. Is that Most Holy Mary? It would have been better if Ponzi, leaving aside the rigid 20th century, had drawn inspirations from the statue sculpted in marble by that French sculptor who, following instructions by Bernadette Soubirous, created the Lourdes image, or the statue in Fatima, which so closely resembles Mary Most Holy. Furthermore, the Blessed Virgin herself expressed her judgment on this on December 28, 1947. Footnote 359. See the entry for that date. And I shall say no more. Well, I'll say one more thing. This time of wrath and darkness renders us so blind, deaf, and foolish as regards beauty that we are unable to provide even a pale image of what eternal beauty is: Jesus, the Virgin, the saints, and so on, and we manufacture monsters reflecting the stiff hardness of our spirits, dead to love.